Hi guys, my name is Armalita Holley and I am one of the educators here at the Mariners Museum, which is located in Newport News, Virginia. And our museum deals with the history of the sea, and we love to talk about people who traveled on the sea and the reasons why they traveled. But one of the things that we're really known for here at the Mariners Museum is what's known as the Battle of Hampton Roads, which was a battle that was fought during the Civil War between two of the first ironclads built over here in the Americas, the CSS Virginia and the USS Monitor. Well, it was actually a man named Stephen Mallory who decided we really need to get an edge on the Union troops and be able to find a way to get beyond the whole Anaconda Plan and the naval blockade that is surrounding our coastlines. So he realized that there was really nothing they can do in terms of trying to match the number of ships, wooden ships, that the Union side. In fact, he said something sort of similar to, for every 100 ships that the Union troops can build, Confederates could only build about one. Okay, but the idea came into his mind to go ahead and build something called an ironclad ship, which was basically a ship that wasn't made out of wood but had iron plating around the hull and even on what became known as the casemate. So he was given $2 million to go ahead and being able to buy one of these ships. Mallory came back, talked to this gentleman, John Porter, gave him the $2 million and said it was his responsibility to go ahead and find a way to build an ironclad. Now, John Porter was actually now in charge of the Gosport Navy Yard, and he starts looking around the Navy Yard trying to figure out what he's going to do, and what he sees is the USS Merrimack. What set it apart was this technology, turret technology, which Erickson didn't invent, but he was the first person to actually put it on top of a ship. Now, for the turret technology, what really makes this different is how it's able to actually engage in war. Something happens to those cannons, and it wants to use the cannons on the starboard side of the ship. What is it going to have to do? It's going to have to turn the entire ship around, use a lot of coal and energy to actually be able to use those cannons, at least shooting in this direction. The Monitor didn't have to do that. Okay? It didn't have to move around at all. The only thing that it had to do was rotate the turret. Okay? It could rotate in 360 degrees. Now, the CSS Virginia had 10 guns, like we talked about earlier. The USS Monitor only 2, but it was at a much greater advantage over the CSS Virginia simply because it could constantly turn around. Okay? The Monitor actually arrived on the scene, realized that the USS Cumberland was no more, that the USS Congress blew up really right before their eyes. They decided to take revenge. Okay? And they were going to get some sort of vengeance by the time that the CSS Virginia showed up to start attacking the USS Minnesota, who was still actually stuck on a sandbar. As soon as the CSS Virginia started to approach the Minnesota, she started shooting at her right away. What she didn't realize is that the Monitor was actually sitting right behind her. The Monitor went ahead and pulled out in front of the USS Minnesota, and the battle of the first two ironclads actually began on March 9, 1862. It began around 8:15 in the morning, and it was going to go to just a little bit after 1 o'clock in that afternoon. 4 hours of two ironclad ships really shouting at one another, sometimes from quite a distance apart, other times from point-blank range, really trying to find a way to be able to defeat the other person, because we've got two iron ships fighting against each other, and nobody had really been in a fight before against another iron ship, so they really had no concept of how they were going to go about defeating this particular ship. So sometimes they tried to ram each other, other times they tried to shoot at different angles and so forth, and it really didn't seem to do anything, any sort of dents and so forth, or really beyond any sort of dents that they were making. But finally, closer to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on that day, the CSS Virginia was able to get a shot at the pilot house. When that happened, the commander, warden of the USS Monitor, ended up being blinded. And as opposed to giving up the battle entirely, he just transferred command over to a Lieutenant Green. But one thing is very clear, and that wooden ships were really no longer going to be able to sustain a national navy. You were going to have to adopt both ironclad technology as well as turret technology to be able to compete on the national level. Now, the USS Monitor did have a little bit of a longer lifespan, but not too much longer. In December of that year, she was being sent down to North Carolina, where she was going to go on patrol duty herself. But as she was being headed down and escorted by the USS Rhode Island, she ran into a storm. Fortunately, 16 different men who ended up sinking with the USS Monitor that night in 1862. And she was going to stay on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean for about 110 years until the year 1973, when a team from Duke University actually went and was able to find the site, the wreck site of the USS Monitor. Well, thanks guys. We're all out of time. Now if you do have any other questions, feel free to email us here at the Mariners Museum and we'll try to get answers back to you as quick as possible. But thank you so much for inviting me into your classroom. I hope you were able to learn some good things about the Civil War and understand a bit about ironclad technology and how the USS Monitor really made a difference in the Civil War. But I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.